This is Janata Television and you are watching The View. Namaste, I am Arun Devjoshi. In The View, we seek views of different personalities from Nepal and sometimes from around the world. We talk about Nepal politics, and as well as world politics, and about different countries and different people from different parts of the world. Today we have invited in the studio with us a prominent American social activist, Cristopher Caruso. Caruso, you are welcome at the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you have been a social activist in America. How is it to be a social activist in America? We think like Americans are almost, they have achieved everything.
Yes.
Yes, this is the, some people from our part of the world is the country of dreams.
Yes.
So still you have to fight for the social activism over there. What is it about?
Yes, well, I think it's one of the kind of victories of American propaganda that most of the world thinks that the United States is universally rich and prosperous, but the truth is very different. And that we've found that there's over 140 million Americans who are poor or low income, meaning that they have to, make choices between skipping a meal or affording their medicine or paying their electric bill.
You are saying that even Americans need to skip a meal for just to survive?
Absolutely. That 1 out of every 5 children in the United States are food insecure and, do not necessarily know where their next meal is coming from.
Okay, even about the medicine you say.
Yeah, so, unlike every other advanced industrialized economy, we do not have universal health care. So there are tens of millions of Americans who lack access to even basic health care, which means that there are many people in communities who may have to literally share their heart medication with a friend in order to be able to afford it. The situation with the lack of health care is it's a real crime that Americans don't have access to just basic health care.
Yes, about the poverty, and even by the American standard, American government says that is $45,000 a year for people of poor person. It's needed to survive.
Yeah.
But the poverty line in America is said to be $20,050, and still there are more than 21% children who are below the poverty level of the government described baseline of poverty level.
Yes.
And about this for survive for 4 people which needs 45,000, 50% of the children live below that level. Is it right?
That's right. That's right. That our poverty line is a very antiquated measure. It literally only takes into account the price of food, and then it estimates how much food you need for a family. It doesn't take into account the cost of housing, the cost of health care, the cost of transportation, childcare. That's all excluded from when the poverty line is determined. So we use an additional measure called the supplementary poverty measure, which we think is more accurate and in line with international standards, which is where this number of 140 million Americans living in poverty comes from. Okay.
And about even the health situation, I've seen a film about Michael Moore, Sicko, yes. A film Sicko.
Yeah.
It tells all about the health conditions in America. So we do feel like that in USA, there's all the health needs are there. Yeah. Everybody is taken care of, the health conditions are taken care of by the government. But actually the real situation is not like that. They are in the insurance system and lots of things are not covered by the insurance.
That's
so
right.
They have to pay high prices for the health care.
Yes.
And they are the people are not able to do that. Is it the fact that how it is over there?
Yes. So healthcare is the leading cause of personal bankruptcy in the United States. And just one example from actually Michael Moore's hometown is in Flint, Michigan, which is a former center of the auto industry. And in Flint, a few years ago, a decision was made by the city to change the source of the Flint's water supply. Mm-hmm. And it turned out that the new water supply was poisoned, that it was contaminated with lead.
Yes.
and other poisons. And when families were complaining that they were being burned by taking a shower, that children's hair was falling out, the state refused to respond. But when General Motors, the car company, said, when we are making parts for our cars, this new water is corroding It's rotting our car parts. The city gave them special permission to change back to the old water system to preserve the car parts, but refused to acknowledge the extreme healthcare crisis that literally poisoned an entire generation of children in a major American city who have irreparable lead poisoning for the rest of their lives, and there has been no provision other than for a time they provided free bottled water, but that has now expired. But there's been no provision to provide health care or any kind of redress for an entire city that's been poisoned. And that's just one example from the United States.
It means that even the country of like America don't much care about their people, but they just care a few high class, so-called high class people of the business community.
That's right. That's right. And our kind of corporate television and the way people's lifestyle is that those people at the top never really see poor people. They kind of live in their own bubbles, and our media never shows the reality of what's happening to the poor majority of the United States. So that's why we feel that building popular mass movements is a necessity in the United States today.
Okay, what have been done so far about making a popular mass movement about this kind of situations? Have you been there some success to do this thing?
Yes, there's a strong community organizing tradition in the United States, and we've had some recent very exciting social energy around the Black Lives Matter movement, around immigration rights, around students against gun violence. And we're in a period where there is heightened social activism, and especially the youth are going into motion. And one of the most encouraging efforts that's happening is the reigniting of Martin Luther King's Poor People's Campaign that he started in 1967, but was cut short after his assassination in 1968. And this Poor People's Campaign has been reignited and has attained a huge amount of interest and is uniting lots of small local struggles into a single larger struggle, and is having a real impact in the United States.
When Barack Obama won the election, he borrowed some words from Martin Luther King, and he was looked as a new Martin Luther King type thing, or maybe he will be doing something to the marginalized community and all other poor people, but it also didn't happen, right?
That's right. There were really high hopes for President Barack Obama, but in terms of, social programming, the expansion of social programming, he did have the passage of the Affordable Health Care Act, or what was called Obamacare, which did extend health care to more uninsured people, but it was essentially a compromise with the corporate healthcare industry, the pharmaceutical companies, and the for-profit healthcare industry, and it failed to reduce healthcare costs. And it has been, it's proving difficult to sustain. It looks like the current Republican Congress are poised to dismantle it. And so, although the effort was laudable, it didn't go far enough. And too many Americans and too many American children have no access to health care at this moment.
But at least Obama tried something, you can say.
He did try. He did try.
Okay. You were talking about immigrations,
Yes.
This time lots of things told about the immigrations. Even the Donald Trump said he will be building a wall between Mexico and America. He even said when Mexico sends its people, they are not sending their best. They are sending people that have lots of problems. They are bringing drugs, they are bringing crime, they are bringing rapists. So this kind of situation is there, and even just now, lots of migrant people were forcefully driven away from USA, and there's issues about children being separated from their parents. So what is the real situation?
Well, Donald Trump was elected by tapping into a long history of racism in the United States and racist lies that were directed against the immigrant community. We have approximately 12 million undocumented immigrants living in the United States, and the statistics of our own government show that they commit crimes at a much lower rate than American citizens. Of course, because they don't have the full rights and protection of U.S. citizens. They work jobs that other Americans aren't aren't willing to work, like agricultural jobs. They pay taxes, they contribute to society, but they're being unfairly demonized for an economy that is failing in the United States, which is failing to provide an increased standard of living in the United States. In fact, wages for the bottom 80% of wage earners in the United States have been flat or falling every year since 1973.
Okay, you mean it's a flat, not rising anymore?
Not rising.
Or just falling over there?
Falling. When adjusted for inflation, the cost of living, Americans have not gotten a raise since 1973. And, you know, some people look for an easy scapegoat to blame, and Donald Trump has blamed immigrants.
Yeah, and even about the immigrants, sometimes they even ask them, like they say the American is a world citizens. They have the people from around the world, and they invite the people from around the world. Like they open a diversity visa.
Yes.
Lots of Nepalese do apply for this lottery, and they get maybe the award, reward, or whatever you can say, and they go over there. But still, the condition is not favorable for them.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. It's very difficult to be an immigrant in the United States, and immigrants work incredibly hard to, you know, earn a place in U.S. society. And the kind of, you know, irresponsible racist rhetoric that, you know, has material effects, that, you know, there's acts of violence against the immigrant community, there's discrimination against the immigrant community, and to have, you know, the office holder of the President of the United States to use this, you know, debased rhetoric against whole communities is a very dangerous and irresponsible development.
Most of the time, migrants are blamed to be lowering the wages, since they work in the low wages, and all the American peoples sometimes do say that due to the migrants, our wages is, like you said, it's always decreasing. The main decrease moment. Even the American people also say it sometimes. Do they any kind of effect about the immigrants have been there in this kind of things? Like even they have to survive there anyway, and they do it anyway. So they work in the low wages.
Yeah, they do, and you know, immigrants have made enormous contributions to American society. You know, and have start businesses, you know, build communities, you know, create new inventions. You know, Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, is a son of an immigrant. Many of the kind of innovators of Silicon Valley are either first or second generation immigrants, and it's been, you know, a mainstream American position, not, you know, even just a left or progressive position, that, you know, America's diversity is America's strength, and that we have, you know, peoples and cultures and ideas from all over the world living together in the United States, and that has something that, you know, ordinary Americans take pride in, but that, you know, that tone has dramatically changed with Donald Trump's presidency.
Okay, and about the health issue you were saying. Like most of the people aren't covered. So what should be done according to you?
Yeah, well, there are certain, you know, state-provided health insurance programs. One of them is called Medicare, which once you're of a retiree age, over 65, there is a kind of public, you know, payment of medical services that is very, very popular program. And, you know, serves, you know, whole generations of older Americans. So a very simple solution would be to expand eligibility to Medicare, an existing, proven, successful, popular program, to all Americans. And in fact, a recent study that was actually paid for by a right-wing funder found that if fully implemented, it would save the United States $2 trillion a year to go to a public funding system, or a single-payer funding system like Medicare for All, because we have the most inefficient healthcare system in the world. We pay more per capita than any other country in the world, and we have some of the worst health outcomes in terms of infant mortality, in terms of a whole host of different, you know, preventable diseases that exist in the United States that are, you know, not only cause pain and human suffering, but also are very expensive and easily treatable if people had access to basic health care. So a Medicare for all is an obvious solution, and it's actually overwhelmingly popular with the American people. A recent study put it as over 70% of the American people are in favor of a Medicare for all solution.
Like there should be free health care, like
Free
in
healthcare.
Europe, in some European countries.
Exactly.
Okay, and what about the education system over there? Is it quite okay then? It's about the healthcare, or it's also like same?
Yeah, I mean, we have a strong education system, but it's been underfunded, and there's been increasing efforts to privatize public education. And one of the things that is a real struggle for students in the United States is student debt. That many of the colleges, even public colleges, the tuition is becoming more and more expensive, the books and the fees are more and more expensive, and so students are taking on tens of thousands, sometimes over $100,000 of student debt just to get a 4-year college education, which then often burdens them for the rest of their working lives.
Is it because of the policy of the government, or they are not supplying enough budget for the education system?
That's right. There's been less and less of the public budget going to even, the public education system. It's been cut year after year, and so then tuition has had to raise. So my own university, the City University of New York, CUNY, in the 1970s, tuition was entirely free, and it was a source of great pride for New Yorkers. And in fact, City College, one of our campuses, was considered the Harvard of the working class. But after the fiscal crisis of New York in the 70s, they imposed tuition, and tuition has gone higher and higher and higher because funding from the state has been cut and cut and cut. And our universities are really suffering for this. We used to attract students from all over the world to come to United States universities, but that is starting to slow down because of the state of funding for our university system.
And they have any issues of the equal pay as well, equal pay for women and men, equal pay for the immigrants and the Native Americans.
Yes.
So it's also the issue over there. What is the real issue? That they are not paying as, like we hear about that there is no equal pay in America. Is it right that? Is it so?
That's right. There's huge disparities along, racial lines, gender lines, immigration lines in terms of the equal pay for the same work that we had during the fiscal crisis of 2007, 2008. The pay disparity between men and women actually decreased, but not because women were making more, but because men were working less. So that's, a step towards equality, but maybe not in the direction we would have wanted, right? We would have wanted women to be making more. Yeah. And so, these are real struggles. These are long-term historical struggles. Every year the Equal Rights Amendment for men and women attempts to pass Congress and is denied. And we struggle with these, long-held issues of discrimination, really, in terms of equal pay.
Certainly in our part of country, in our part of the world, that women who work more than men, since they work in the offices, they work in the household. So exactly not in your condition, like to make food, you do it for yourself. Like in our part, even women have to make foods for the men as well. Yeah. For the home, take care of their children. Yes. So it's not exactly like that. Even though they are being paid less, and the issue is there, right?
That's right. That's right. And women are being paid significantly less than men for the same job. And although there is more sharing of domestic responsibilities, still women carry the majority of the burden of the work in the home that's unpaid.
And in the world, there have been lots of issues of climate change recently. Yes. But your president had different take about the climate change. He has been once saying that it's freezing, it's snowing in New York, and we need global warming. Yeah. So, and the concept of global warming is created by China. Yeah. Just to make U.S. manufacturing non-competitive. Yeah. So, what do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's an overwhelming consensus of scientists in the US and in the world that climate change is caused by human activity. There's really no question when it comes to the science, but it's the propaganda and the corporate media that constantly sows doubt and division about this question. And now they have their number one spokesperson for climate change denial in the office of the presidency, and he is doing real damage that at a time when it looks like 2018 is going to be, like the last 3 years. It will be the fourth year in the row of record-breaking temperatures in the world. We are reaching absolute crisis points in terms of being able to stop a tipping point after which a cyclic feedback loop of ever hotter temperatures will increase. That this is a matter of incredible urgency for human survival, and to have a president that denies even the existence of this it's very distressing. It's very distressing, and he dropped out of the Paris Climate Accords. That was one of his very first actions as president, which didn't go far enough, but at least set some kind of benchmark and intentions. And we need to return to those and do better than that as soon as humanly possible.
But third world country like us, we who have some concept of carbon dollars, we can get it from the richer countries who have been more into jeopardizing this environment. So from this Donald Trump saying that's all denied.
Yes. That's right. That's right. And he's back to attempting to subsidize the coal industry, which if just given free market economics, the coal industry was going under in the United States. Solar power, per kilowatt hour without any subsidy is now competitive with fossil fuels. This is a time when we should be absolutely embracing, renewable energy, and it's technically feasible. It's not pie in the sky. Like, the technology is here now. And other countries, India has made enormous strides, China's made enormous strides on these issues of renewable energy, and the United States is sadly lacking far behind on this question.
Okay, and other thing is oftenly raised about the United States is racism. Black people are not treated equally. Again, the treating equal is there, and the racism against Black American population. Like, even I'll quote again Donald Trump. He has said, "I have great relation with the black. I will have always great relation with black." He has just put in a relation with one of his black friends or somewhere. So they are always been fighting for their rights, black people, and they are always considered. Whenever even some people from Nepal who go to the USA, they say just about blacks, they may steal you. Is it the situation?
Yeah, I mean, we have to go back and acknowledge the brutal history of slavery in the United States, a history that's still with us today. And, racism is a constant in U.S. history. One of the things that's happening is that now that everyone has a video camera in their pocket, in their cell phone, that more and more acts of police brutality against African Americans are becoming documented and then spread via the internet. Of course, this isn't actually new behavior by American police, but we actually now have the technology to document it far better. And it is causing some reckoning, and there are popular movements against the criminal justice system, against the mass incarceration that imprisons black people at ridiculously disproportionate rates to other races, that there is a pushback in terms of Black Lives Matter and in terms of other movements, but racism remains one of the central questions of social justice in the United States today. And of course, again, Donald Trump, his rise to popularity as kind of a tabloid star centered around this case in New York City of the Central Park jogger rape case, where he took out a full-page ad calling for the death penalty against these young black men who were arrested for the crime that were later completely exonerated. They were completely innocent. But he was the one beating the drum that they should immediately receive the death penalty, and that's what put him on the map as this kind of tabloid celebrity in the 1980s. And It's been documented that his father was arrested at a Ku Klux Klan rally, which was a white terrorist anti-black organization, and a long history of discriminating against black tenants in the buildings that his father owned in Queens. There's a long history of racism with Trump and the Trump family, and again, to abuse the pulpit that he has as the President of the United States to continue to make racist remarks, to attack American football players for kneeling, not to protest the flag, but to protest the police brutality against black people that's happening in America, that he is very consciously doing this to whip up racist hate in the United States to secure his very fragile base of support. That he is one of the least popular presidents since modern polling began in the United States. And even though he has control of both houses of Congress, the presidency, and the Supreme Court, he has not been able to expand his base of support to any new people. And so he constantly has to rile his very small, narrow base up with these appeals to racism and xenophobia. And it is, a ghastly display by a United States president.
Yeah, could you say it like that? It was like a Germany, Hitler Germany, Nazis were there. Nazis were too much racist and they were not accepting the other people to be there. Donald Trump is like trying to create such a situation in USA.
I mean, many people are drawing those comparisons. There are direct comparisons between where he has held press conferences with family members who have been murdered by immigrants to stand up and highlight, even though, again, if you look at the objective numbers, immigrants murder far fewer people than, American citizens do. This is, literally a tactic that Nazis did against Jews prior to the Holocaust. There are very disturbing parallels in terms of the ripping away of children from people that are legitimately and legally seeking asylum in the United States, or having their children snatched away from them, kept in horrendous conditions, and in some cases lost in the system and not reunited with their parents. There are disturbing echoes with Nazi Germany, although of course, we don't want to take the comparison too far. There have not been mass murders, and we don't want to belittle what happened during the Holocaust. But there are sobering parallels that I think is a responsible thing to say.
Can we say that like American society is now divided with like some of the radical nationalists and liberals? Is it so that people are divided in two ways?
I think the division gets overstated in our media. That yes, that Donald Trump has this kind of reactionary core of maybe 25% of the country that is actively supporting and his rhetoric, and that they think that somehow if Donald Trump can keep immigrants down or keep black people down, that they could rise up, which of course is false. But I think the majority of the United States people are decent people that do not support Donald Trump's agenda and are aghast at the kind of irresponsible rhetoric that he has. I don't think that I don't think we are as torn apart as is portrayed, but we have an incredible divide between rich and poor in the United States, and we have, this kind of 1% of super wealthy, especially now the kind of Silicon Valley kind of titans of industry who are becoming so far away from the reality of the majority of Americans. Like Jeff Bezos, from the founder of Amazon, is now the world's richest person, and extremely dangerous to have, this level of inequality. We literally haven't seen this level of inequality in the United States since the Roaring 20s, right before the Great Depression of the 1930s is the only, comparable era of this amount of inequality in the United States. And I think that basic economic inequality becomes expressed through all of these other historic forms of social division.
Okay, and telling about the United States, when we see United States from here, we are quite surprised to see sometimes lots of people, school children, being killed by a single person with a gun.
Yes.
and lots of the time black people are abused to have a gun, but equal number of white people are also killing killing the students in masses.
Yes.
So there's a debate about the gun culture in America.
Yeah.
Somebody say it's a right to have a gun to protect themselves.
Yeah.
Somebody say there shouldn't be any guns with the people. So what do you say? How is this gun culture? What has the impact in the society of America?
Yes. Well, I mean, there is a gun violence epidemic in the United States, and most dramatically expressed by these mass school shootings, which are an absolute horror, and really are unique to the United States. That you don't see this happening in other nations. That
Yes.
other nations have, have guns in them, but you don't see this kind of this level of violence. I think that for sure there's too many guns in America. There's literally more guns than there are people in the United States, and not just a shotgun or a rifle or a handgun, but high-powered, semi-automatic, military grade weaponry is in the hands of the population, and we have a minority of Americans who stockpile enormous amount of weapons and ammunition. And I think that, of course, there need to be stronger gun laws. There needs to be, I think that we should ban semi-automatic weapons in the way that we've banned fully automatic weapons, so that it could dramatically reduce the amount of this killing that's going on. But I think there's underlying that, there is this level of dehumanization that's happening in American culture, that with the increased inequality and increased poverty, there's been a real loss of community, and that people who are experiencing this extreme economic hardship feel alone and isolated and don't see what's happening to them as a kind of social or economic phenomenon, but see it as this kind of personal failing. And there's a lot of kind of isolation and self-blame that's happening in the United States right now that I think contributes to the kind of dehumanization of other people. And I think that sensible gun laws, gun control, as well as a move to a more just basic equity in society would reduce.
You say that just controlling the gun wouldn't be the solution,
That's
but the
right.
change in the mindset of the society, that they are feeling loneliness, change in the feeling of loneliness also have to be done to reduce these kind of things.
There has to be a change in the culture. And another thing that has to be said is these school shootings are almost entirely done by young white men. And that there is this culture of toxic masculinity, which is related to the loss of economic position, the lack of a rising standard of living, men feeling like they can't provide anymore. But there is a kind of a toxic masculinity that has to be challenged, that is certainly playing a role in these obscene gun deaths.
Okay, we talked lots about America. You had some insights about the American society and real people's perspective.
Yeah.
But looking outside the world from America, like America is said to be the #1 country in the world, so-called #1 country in the world, most economically developed country in the world. So well, you see outside the world from America, even in Europe, even in Asian countries like South Asia, like us.
Yeah.
So what do you feel like? You are real high society and others are just small brothers. Do you have to care for them?
No.
Or what do you feel?
I mean, I think, America, the United States has, a long history of capitalist development. And, soon after the Industrial Revolution in England happened, it was quickly transferred to the East Coast of the United States. And U.S. had kind of a head start on economic development and had, these enormous oceans on either side to protect it and allowed it to develop, relatively, uncontested. And, it's a large country with many natural resources. And so America, United States has had many advantages, but, I think it would be a real, chauvinism to think that there is this kind of American exceptionalism, that the United States is beyond critique, or that, that U.S. imperialism is not a real phenomenon that affects, hundreds of millions of people around the world. I think, people from the United States have to adopt an attitude of humility when dealing with the rest of the world, and that there's an enormous amount that we have to learn from how other countries are solving challenges. Because I think we could see that we have a United States economy that is stagnant. We have an absolute political crisis in the presidency of Donald Trump. We have a legitimacy crisis in our basic institutions that are increasingly untrusted. That the U.S. needs to, have a dose of humility and learning from the successes and breakthroughs from around the world, that that we need to take our place side by side along other countries, and not think that this kind of heady period after the fall of the Soviet Union, where there was talk of this kind of unipolar moment with the United States being this, this sole superpower. I think if that ever was true, those days are already over, and they were over quite rapidly, and that we need, especially in the face of global challenges like climate change, that we more than ever need to work, multilaterally with, in cooperation with the nations of the world.
Okay. And about Nepal, you have been, you said you have been in Nepal for the second time this time. You have come long before. So this time there's a communist government in Nepal, like almost 2/3 government had almost 2/3 majority support.
Yeah.
So they have planning lots of socialist reform as well. If you say the agenda it's there, but it will be done or not, it will be later to be seen.
Yeah.
So how do you feel like coming to Nepal, being a social activist over there?
Yeah.
So how do you feel? How is Nepal going, and how should it go?
Well, I have to say that the overwhelming popular democratic victory of the Communist Party of Nepal has been an inspiration to socialists in the United States and around the world. And people are looking with great hope to see, what can be accomplished here with this, very strong popular mandate from the whole population. And I love Nepal. I have been so graciously welcomed here in this country, and I have seen how much has changed over the past 25 years since I was here last, the amount of development that's happened in that time, and the real, just dignity, this kind of basic dignity that you could see just in the kind of poise and posture of Nepalis, this sense of pride that is inspiring, that is beautiful to see.
Okay, and last question for you is how it is hard to be a socialist or a communist in the United States?
Yeah, well, it's not easy, but it's getting easier. That there was a recent poll in the United States that actually the majority of young people, of people under 25, see socialism more favorably than they do capitalism, which is the first time that this has happened. And there have been recent breakthroughs with the Democratic primary run of the candidate Bernie Sanders that has introduced ideas into the mainstream of American public discourse that hadn't been there in many years. And so, beginning to talk about, a human right to healthcare, that healthcare is a right to all, that people should have a right to clean water, that there is real hope and motion in the United States now that there hadn't been in a long time. So I think although it is difficult, and we have nothing like the Communist Party of Nepal, nothing comparable to the Communist Party of Nepal. So
it is Communist Party is banned in United States.
Right. They're very, very, very tiny. But we do have very, very active social movements and community-based movements that I think over time will coalesce into political parties and be able to make large-scale change. And I'm very hopeful about the future of the U.S.
Okay, we are also hopeful about the future of the U.S. and about our country and about the world. Thank you, Chris, for being with us.
Thank you so much.
And showing insights about the American society.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, you viewers as well. Today we had with us American social activist Cristopher Caruso. We'll again come to the view with different personalities. You keep watching Janata Television. Namaste.